Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mark Twain House Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm delighted to be hosting this evening's program with S.A. Sean Cosby. We'll be calling him Sean, and Stephen Graham Jones. Some of you, this is your second time trying to take part in this event. You'll recall back in July, we had some weather-related technical glitches, and we're just so grateful to Sean and Stephen for rejoining us this evening for this conversation. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm not going to talk too very long because I know you're eager to hear the two of them talk instead of me. First of all, I can see you're already chatting in the chat. And thank you for... Sorry about that. And keep chatting away and enjoy each other's company. You know, that's something you can't do live when you're sitting in an auditorium listening to speakers talk. So please take advantage of that opportunity and know that that chat remains live. This program is being recorded, as all of our Crowdcast author talks are. They're all on our website at marktwainhouse.org. And if you make a friend or think of something that you want to share later on, just come on back and rejoin the chat. But if you do have a question for either Stephen or Sean this evening, rather than post it in the chat, you could make our lives a lot easier if you would do me the favor of posting it in the Ask a Question area at the bottom of your screen. And I'll be popping back into the program after the conversation, and I'll be helping to manage the Q&A. So do ask questions. I see that there are 3 of them already before the conversation's even started. So thank you for that. While we're looking at that part of the screen, I'd like to direct your attention, if I may, to that long green button that says your support is vital to the Mark Twain House and Museum. That's really true. Your support is vital. We've been doing these programs and are very proud to have offered so many of these programs since the pandemic began. They are free by and large to you, but they're not free for us to produce. So anything you can do to support us, to contribute, to help us continue providing this venue for these fascinating talks with authors, we very much appreciate it. $5, $10, $50, whatever you can spare. I just want you to know that on behalf of the board and the staff of the Mark Twain House and Museum, every single penny is deeply appreciated and every single penny is put to very, very good use. Behind me, I have the 2 books that we're talking about tonight. Sean S.A. Cosby's Razorblade Tears and Stephen Graham Jones's brand new book, My Heart is a Chainsaw. And we were so excited to be able to say tonight is Razorblade Chainsaw. Really good combination. There's a link in the chat for each of these books you can purchase through the Mark Twain House and Museum. And know that, I mean, we're no dummies. We know you can buy these books elsewhere, but if you do make that purchase through the Mark Twain House, first of all, you get a signed copy. And second of all, you have the benefit of knowing that your purchase supports the Mark Twain House and Museum. And we are very, very grateful for that support. I want to thank our sponsors tonight. Tonight's program, like so many of our programs, is sponsored by the Wish You Well Foundation and by Connecticut Public, WNPR. And it's produced in part with support honoring the legacy of Frank Lord, who was a beloved longtime trustee of the museums, and we miss him very much. So our guests tonight, Stephen Graham Jones is the New York Times best-selling author of nearly 30 novels and collections, and there's some novellas and comic books out there as well. He's been an NEA recipient. He's won the Texas Institute of Letters Award for fiction, the LA Times Ray Bradbury Prize, and a number of other awards. He's the guy who wrote Mongrels and the wonderful book, The Only Good Indians in 2020, and now My Heart is a Chainsaw. He lives and joins us tonight from Boulder, Colorado. S.A. Cosby is an Anthony Award-winning writer from Southeastern Virginia. He's the best-selling author of Blacktop Wasteland, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice and Goodreads Choice Award semifinalist, as well as Brotherhood of the Blade and My Darkest Prayer. When not writing, he's an avid hiker and chess player. We're delighted to welcome both of you tonight. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Sean S.A. Cosby and Stephen Graham Jones.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for showing up for this. It's really cool getting to hang out with Sean. I think if Sean and I lived closer together, we'd probably be hanging out all the time, you know, but we don't. We live like many states away from each other. So we have to hang out in virtual space like this with y'all, which is wonderful, you know.
I think if
Yeah.
we live closer, we might be getting in trouble because I
Yeah,
can
I
see
think
us
so.
hanging out a lot
I think so, man.
over
Yeah.
over some libations, man. Good to see you, my brother.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. And I feel like we kind of there's a line in Razorblade Tears. I've got it written down up here. It makes me feel like we grew up in the same place. Like Red Hill ain't got no streets, just a lot of roads that don't go nowhere. That's exactly where I grew up too. It just wasn't called Red Hill.
I'll tell you, man.
Um,
The Only Good Indians and My Heart Is a Chainsaw both remind me. It's funny, geographically, they couldn't be further apart from Razorblade
mhm,
Tears and Blacktop Wasteland, but there's a spirituality of a connectivity that exists. And I think I don't want to make an assumption, but I think when you
mhm,
grow up in similar circumstances like we did,
mhm.
there's a lot of things that are universal when it comes to that, and
Yeah.
I find that incredibly comforting. It's great reading a book that's not mine that I could realize that, oh, that person or that guy gets where we're coming from, understands what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, and as a
Yeah. No, it's
definitely.
wonderful, man. When I was reading your Blacktop Wasteland, that was, I think, the first time I'd read a book by somebody who was as much of a gearhead as I am. Like it mattered what kind of rear end was in this car when it was taking off and stuff. And it felt so good to read that, man. Yeah.
Oh man, I tell you, I was reading. I'm gonna get to My Heart Is a Chainsaw because I love that book. But
Mhm,
when I was reading The Only Good Indians, man, the scene at the very beginning, when that particular character goes to a bar, and it's
mhm,
like, man, I've been that guy more than once. Cause see, where I grew
mhm.
up, there's only honky tonks. So
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
in, you want a drink, you want a beer if that's what you want or whatever, but
Yeah.
you always had to be prepared that you might have to throw knuckles. And so I
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
it definitely made the skin on back of my neck even before the scary stuff started. I was already like, oh man, keep your head on the swivel, bro. And then My Heart Is a Chainsaw. And then My Heart
Mhm,
Is a Chainsaw, man, reading about Jade and that whole town and how
mhm,
that sort of, I think people think gentrification is only an urban issue. And it's like I'm living in an area right now that is being remodeled and remade
mhm, mhm.
for as a tourist destination. So
Yeah.
I definitely got the gist of that too, outside of how
Yeah.
scary the damn book is. So
Well, man, if you like own land where they're gentrifying, then you're in luck, because you can cash out. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the thing, man. That's the
Yeah.
thing. You got to be in that spot where they want to make some moves because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting though,
Yeah.
man. Because like I, not to get too far into the weeds about it, but
Mhm,
where I live, where I grew up at, there's nobody there anymore. My mom passed away and
mhm,
everything, so nobody lived there, but I still own the land. And I would say every 6 months, somebody hits me up. I get a text alert.
mhm.
Are you interested in selling this land? No, not at all. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
you got this number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
We saw some land back where I grew up too, and we're not selling it yet. My uncle just goes there to hunt hogs and deer, but there's oil everywhere, so who knows what'll happen. I'm sure somebody will sell it and I won't see none of the money, of course. But um
That's
hey,
a whole nother conversation for another night.
yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta
Um
say, I love your background, man. Freddie Mercury and Meatloaf, and you're
yeah, man.
wearing the snazzy blazer. I feel underdressed because I'm working with the lumberjack chic look here. This is my brand now. But
Uh, man, this is my Johnny Cash jacket, man. I feel
there
like
you
Johnny
go. Oh
Cash when I wear
man,
it, man. Yeah. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
man, I love me
You
some
know,
Johnny Cash.
Oh yeah, I was watching a documentary thing, or I was that Mike Judge's Tales from the Tour Bus. I don't know if you've seen those; they're really good, man. I was
Yeah,
watching the one on George Jones last night, and talking about the place he grew up, in that what was it, that little town in Texas. Anyway, he lived in a place of it called the Timbers, and he mentioned the documentary, or Mike Judge says he didn't know he was poor because everybody around him was just like him, and I felt like
yeah,
I understand that too, because I remember growing up, let's see, one of our houses was like a tar paper house, like a frame and tar paper, but it didn't matter because all my friends' houses were like that too, and it did. That's just the way it was, you know. So it was
Yeah,
nice. It was nice seeing that George Jones thing. Is what I'm saying.
I got a George Jones lyric in Razorblade
Yeah,
Tears.
you do.
Yeah, I had
I was
to,
gonna.
yeah.
I was gonna ask you about that. Did you have to like pay? Like I did a David Bowie thing in one of my books once, and I had to go to the David Bowie estate and do all this legal stuff and pay money. Did you have to pay money for that George Jones bit?
Here's the funny thing my editor told me, and when we were going through the copy edits with that, because I only used like 2 stanzas, it came under a fair use thing. If I'd used one more word, then it was like I had, because in my previous book, I had an Elvis lyric and I had to cut it down because I had too many words. It would get in that whole Graceland thing. But no, man, it's funny. My grandfather, when I was a kid, we were dirt poor too, man. We were dirt floor poor, man. Everybody always tells me, always asks me, man, how you get those arms? I'm like, from chopping wood. And it's like we got a wood stove. That was my workout. That was my CrossFit program. But my grandfather, when we were kids, my grandfather loved country music and blues, and I grew up at about it. I think we're about the same age. I grew up at the beginning, the nascent beginning of hip hop, and so when we were kids, my grandfather wanted to watch Hee Haw on Saturday night, and we were all trying to get him to watch Soul Train. He didn't want to watch Soul Train, so and I feel terrible about this. My grandfather couldn't read, and so I came up with the bright idea of looking in the TV guide and telling him, "Oh, granddad, they preempted Hee Haw again, man. I don't know what's going on." And he's like, "Oh, you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, it looks like Hee Haw's not coming on again tonight." And I got away with that. I got away with that for a month before my grandmother stepped in, because my grandmother was a huge reader, and I got in so much trouble. Oh my God, I got so punished. I had to stand outside. I had to stand outside for 2 weeks when Soul Train came on. I couldn't even be in the house. So that tells you a little bit about me and the way I process things. But anyway,
No, I remember. I
great
remember Hee
kid.
Haw well, man. They'd open that door and tell the joke and everything. I loved Hee Haw, man. Yeah.
Oh man, I came to get appreciation for it when I got a little older. And when by the time I got to high school, I didn't feel the pressure to just like one thing. Like I felt like I could like whatever kind of music I wanted. So that's when I got into Springsteen and stuff like that. I really got into Springsteen in high school. Like I had a whole phase of just denim jackets. But man, I wanted to ask you a question because I guess we should talk about books. That's what people are here for. I wanted we could talk about that stuff all day long, man. Oh my God, I feel like I've known you forever. But I wanted to ask you about My Heart is a Chainsaw and The Only Good Indians, where I don't want to give too much away about either for anybody who hasn't read them. But with Only Good Indians, there's definitely a very strong supernatural streak, and I don't think that's giving anything away. Running through the book, whereas there's with Chainsaw, there's a distinct, more humanistic Friday the 13th, Scream, Halloween, the burning stuff, where it's a human evil presence, a shape, if you will, something like that. Was that something you did on purpose? Was that intentional that when you came up to do Chainsaw, you decided to veer away a little bit from the supernatural stuff?
Yeah, I did. I knew that a lot of people had found The Only Good Indians, and so they were expecting a certain thing of me. And so I think when people are expecting a certain thing of you, then you have to do the opposite. You have to go a different direction. And so I wanted to build Chainsaw, like you're saying, like not dependent on an elk walking upstairs in a house, that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it was definitely intentional. I wanted to ask you a question too about Razorblade Tears. Buddy and Ike seem to me to be like the perfect, like they're basically a buddy cop group, like they're Merton Riggs, they balance each other perfect. How do you, like when you're writing it? I've never tried this before. I've never done this before. I don't know if I have the nerve to try it. How do you do that? How do you balance, like it's I think one of them ends up being the protagonist. I don't want to give nothing away, but for most of the book, it feels like they're both like in the spotlight. Was it hard to balance? Was it hard to figure out where to shine that light?
It wasn't hard to figure it out, but it was hard to do it. Because when I structured the book, I'm not a big outliner. I don't do outlines. I write like synopsises, whatever the
Yeah.
plural of synopsis is.
Yeah.
I read a long synopsis, and I knew in the synopsis that I wanted both of them to have, to make a film reference. I wanted them both to have a lot of screen time. And so initially, I had the idea of doing a chapter, every other chapter from one of their perspectives. So one chapter is Ike's chapter, and the other chapter is Buddy Lee's chapter, and then somewhere about 3/4 in, they converge, and it's them together. And it sort of came out that way. I think Ike does sort of tend to take the lead a little bit, but I think both of them, like you said, that whole Murtaugh and Riggs, or that, like, I was aiming for that kind of feel, that Defiant Ones, Sidney Poitier, Tony Curtis feel.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part we got it. What ended up happening was that Buddy Lee gets all the good one-liners, and Ike gets all the good threats. Like Ike has there's 2 threats that Ike has that, like, I had a reader tell me it made the hair stand up on the back of the neck. But then everybody likes Buddy Lee because he's funny. But then I kind of changed it up a little bit, because there's a threat that Buddy Lee gives toward the end of the book. That's one of my favorite things I ever wrote. He says to a character, he says, "One of these days, sooner than you think, the last thing you're ever going to hear is your heart going silent. And the last thing you're ever going to see is me and Ike holding it in our hands." And I thought that really helped to balance out that, like you said, that buddy cop sort of formula. But it was easy to come up with the idea. It was difficult to execute. It really was. I probably wanted to do it again.
Well, and I said Murtaugh and Riggs, really, Hap and Leonard from Joe Lansdale are probably a better, like, pair, like they match up with these guys a lot better,
They were a huge influence. Those books were a huge influence on me too. Because what I wanted, not to belabor the point, but what I wanted to do with Razorblade, sort of like you said with Only Good Indians, a lot of people read Blacktop Wasteland and were like, "Oh, I'm just do Blacktop Wasteland too." Just do another heist novel, another outlaw alone novel. And I really wanted to challenge myself. And like you were saying, I think when people have expectations of you, it's good to kind of usurp them a little bit. And for me as a writer, I mean, I could write Blacktop Wasteland 10 times. I could do that. It's not saying it's easy, but I wanted to kind of push myself to do something a little different. And the subject matter, Razorblade Tears, was kind of challenging. But it was one of them things, like, halfway through it, I felt like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Oh my God, I am deep in the weeds here. But the only way out is through. Let me ask you something.
The only way through is to use a bush axe, man, like the people that they use in here.
I love using garden tools in my writing. I love, like, bush axes. And weird tools that people don't realize unless you grew up in the country. So bush axes and tampers, and stuff like that.
I was so happy when you used a tamper, because I've never seen anybody talk about a tamper before, but we always grew up having to use those things with tampers and hole drivers that you put on either side of a fence post and hammer down.
I put more than my share of fence posts up.
Man, I've hammered on one of those things so much that the butt came out of it. So.
Oh man, I broke a tamper once. I was doing I used to do landscaping. And I was trying to work my way through college with it, and I was doing it, and I got really mad about something, and I snapped the handle right off.
Man, I had a you're talking about chopping wood earlier. I was doing that in high school, going at some stuff, and I didn't realize that my last hit. Let's see, how do I do it? Like this. The axe handle had splintered, and so I ran my hand up, and then I ran my hand down like you do. And that splinter went through my hand. It got bigger and bigger when it got to the bottom, and it was just right through my hand, man. So I just had to break it off, and go to the emergency room, man.
I'm gonna share another. I'm gonna share another poor people's physical ailment for you, and then I'll ask you another question about the book. We grew up with a wood stove, so we had a wood stove in our house, a little cast iron potbelly stove, but the size of a toilet, really. And you had to clean out the ashes in the morning to start the fire. And sometimes there'd be a hot coal down in the bottom there, and you just had to be careful, And so one day I was cleaning out the ashes. I think I was like 13 or 14. I was cleaning out the ashes, and a damn chimney swallow came down the chimney, flew up and like shot the ashes up in my face by him fluttering his window wings and stuff, and a hot coal went right into my eye, and I was just losing my mind. And my grandfather heard me screaming, and he came in. What's wrong? What's wrong? And I like pointed at my eye, and I remember my grandfather. He just grabbed like there was a glass on the table, on the coffee table. He just threw it in my face, and I think it was like old cold coffee or something. I don't know. So anyway, we ended up going to the hospital and stuff. So good times.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about the main character of My Heart is a Chainsaw, because I'm a huge horror fan, and I write crime novels, but I'm a huge horror fan. And Jade is such an interesting, and I don't want to give anything away, but she's such an interesting final girl. And for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what a final girl is this stereotypical character in a horror movie or novel who is the final person to face the killer. You know, she's the star, she's the heroine of the story. And I think Jade's fascination with horror movies, it's deeper than, say, for instance, like Randy in Scream, where he knows a lot about horror movies. But it's almost like that's just an affectation for him. For me, I felt like Jade, horror movies were just a part of her psyche. It's like a part of her dealing with the harsher aspects of her life. And I was just wondering, where did that character come from?
You know, I didn't think about it until I'd written the novel, but in high school I was a night janitor, you know, and like I was into horror, and I knew all the weird stuff about the movies and everything. Like I made a list, I don't know where it is, but it's like all these, like there's 10 things that is really me and Jade, you know. So she probably is some version of me, but at the same time, my daughter was 17 while I was writing Jade, you know, and so she could kind of be a model a little bit as well. But really, talking about her being like Randy from Scream, like what I always wondered about with Randy was, why does he know all this stuff? Is it just because it's inherently neat? And so with Jade, I wanted her to know all this stuff. I wanted her to have a reason for knowing it. And her reason is that, like, here's a crowd of people in the light, and she's way out here on the outside in the cold. And so she has to insulate herself with horror movies, with trivia, you know? But when you insulate yourself like that, that becomes like something you see the world through, you know? So every interaction, every part of her life, she sees it with slasher goggles, and she always can come up with an appropriate horror movie line or something, you know? So, but yeah, I mean, basically though, she's her own person. She's a lot cooler than I could ever be, I think. But you know, that's how you do it. You kind of like idealize, like you kind of like wish you could be that cool, so you write that character. And that's what I do anyways, man. Yeah. Like I wish I could have, yeah. No, I wish I could have lines. No, go on, man.
No, I was just gonna say, just to verify your point, that's what Beauregard is. Bug in Blacktop Wasteland is just, it's a version of how I wish I could have been, how I wish I could be. He's parts of me turned up to like 15 and way cooler and way smoother and way smarter, because I'm terrible with math. And I was a pretty good gearhead, but I was a gearhead out of necessity. Like, you know, I knew how to make a fan belt out of pantyhose because we were broke. I wasn't skilled like Beauregard was. No, she's a fascinating character, man. One of my I think things that I work really hard at, and is writing really good, realistic female characters, because I don't want any of my characters to be caricatures, you know. And I work really hard to try to make the characters be complex and have full, you know, just a full breadth of and depth of interest. And I think that you really do really well with that. And, you know, and not only in Only Good Indians or Chainsaw, but in Mongrels and your short story collection, The People Light. I'm butchering that title, but your female characters have a very strong presence. They have a lot of agency, and not everybody does that. And it's really interesting to see that in a horror movie, where a lot of times, or not movie, excuse me, it felt like a movie when I was reading it. In a horror novel, where a lot of times female characters are just, you know, props, and none of the female characters in Chainsaw feel like props. So I think that's interesting. Were you raised with a lot of women in your life? I was just curious.
I was, yeah, I was. I mean, we lived all over the place, and I lived with all kinds of different relatives, but I was usually coming back to my mom and my grandma. You know, they were always around, and everybody else would come and go, of course. But yeah, both of them were always around, and they're both like really strong personalities. You know, and like my mom, she'd go to the wall for any of her kids. You know, and so like when I wrote my very first horror novel in 2006, well, I wrote it in '99. When it came out in 2006, I thought, what's the scariest thing I can do? And the scariest thing I could think of was to show a mom who is not the kind of mom that I believe in or that I grew up with, you know? And so what happens in Demon Theory is a 14-year-old boy, a son, he goes down to the fruit cellar, steps up on a stool, puts his head in a noose and steps off that stool, and he's hanging there jerking. The mom opens the door, comes down the stairs and sees him. And so she rushes across the room to him, grabs him around the legs. But because I wanted to do the worst thing I could, instead of her lifting him up, she pulls him down, you know? And that to
Oh
me was
wow.
the most horror I could think of, you know?
Yeah. That's dark, man. I tell you, man, I love that you have no fear of going to those dark places, man. There's a scene in The Only Good Indians, and I'm a pretty tough sell because you know anybody reads my book knows, anybody reads my books know that I have no problem dishing out the violence. There's a wood chipper scene in Razorblade Tears that's still getting me yelled at by people.
Yeah.
And but there's a scene in The Only Good Indians, man. I think it's the last scene in the book that has gotten to me where I had to like stop for a second, and I'm just gonna give a very, very obtuse description of it, but it's the motorcycle wheel scene. I'm just gonna leave it at that. And then I was like, man, nobody goes for it like Stephen Graham Jones. Oh, damn.
Well,
I was like, shit, man. I was like, wow. I'm like, and like I said, I mean, you know, I have a penchant for people getting hit in the face with tools, but that scene, that got to me.
Well, thank you. You know, my first story I ever published has a guy catching it across the face. He catches a crescent wrench across the face. You know, I have a penchant for tools and faces too, man, for sure. You know, I'm looking at my notes here. I read your book. It's like right when it came out. I forget when it was. It hadn't been long, but all my notes are just I type your words in, like give a man a clipboard and watch his true nature come out, you know, or driven by a woman with the most severe, I want to speak with the manager haircut I've ever seen or he'd ever seen. You know, neither one of us was Howard Cunningham. That might be my favorite line. I love that, man.
I love reading Raymond Carver, but I don't write like that.
Yeah. But you do lines like, here's another one. The wound on his cheek was weeping like a broken-hearted bride. Is this stuff like when you're writing, does that just spill out, or do you have to like go back and sculpt those lines out of like the clay of the first draft or whatever?
Oh man, I will tell you this: my metaphors and similes are way more obtuse in the first draft. I like writing in very very arcane, interesting, incongruous ways. You know, I love putting two things that don't seem to go together and force them to fit in the simile or metaphor in a sentence. And so a lot of times in the second draft is me paring that stuff down. My poor editor, I was the email was like, I don't think we need 12 of these similes on this page. It's like, I think, can we cut it? Can we get to 6? Can we half it? I'm like, all right. You know, I just love, because for me, I know I get that all the time. For me, writing is all about rhythm. I love the rhythm, either with the dialogue or with a lot of times I write in third person omniscient. So with the narration. And so I love that kind of rhythm, you know, the brokenhearted bride and, somebody's guts unspooling like saltwater taffy soaked in Merlot and stuff like that. I love putting like something really, really sophisticated, like a very, nice glass of Merlot with something horrific, like somebody's in, the pink fibrous intestine. So I grew up on a farm. So I had a lot of experience with seeing insides of pigs and stuff. So it's all about the rhythm for me. I love that kind of language. I love that kind of ebb and flow linguistically. But it's also my greatest weakness because I can go overboard with it. And I have a tendency to kind of embellish too much, and so I had to pare it down. Less is more, and I've learned that over the years.
Yeah.
But it's something that just kind of comes out of me sometimes.
That's cool. I wonder how it translates. Like if when this book, or it's, I mean, like I'm sure Razorblade Tears is already in French, or like I wonder how this stuff translates. You know, man. Do you get like? Do you?
You know what? I would
Yeah.
tell you a funny.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know how it translates, but Blacktop Wasteland was released in Japan earlier this year, and they couldn't translate the title. So the title in Japan is Hard Road for Black Americans. I love that. I think that's the coolest thing. I'm like, it is a hard road. I think, yeah, I can buy that.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice, man. That's
Oh
nice.
man,
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm getting. Actually, I did a thing with a group in Romania recently. They had a book festival, and they had picked Razorblade Tears, and they're gonna send me the translated copy of it. I want to learn some Romanian to read it to see how they translate, because I write in a very Southern fiction and Southern writing is very dependent on metaphor, similes, and stuff like that. So I'm wondering how that translates in a non-English. Like in the UK, it seems like people kind of get it. But I've had some people send me emails from France and Germany where they want me to explain, how does the devil's toenails and all that. So,
yeah. But I guess like you mentioned, Easy Rollins in here. They'll all know Easy Rollins, I expect.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so. Walter, man, that's the guy.
Yeah.
That's the dude.
Oh
man. That's my dude. Man,
Yeah.
I love me some Walter Mosley, man.
So do I, man. He's like liquid smooth or something, man. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man. His writing, you talk about effortlessness, and I think the mark of a true genius is doing something incredibly difficult and making it look hard, or vice versa, doing something really easy and making it look difficult. And Walter does both. He's incredible.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, some writers you read them and you're impressed, but you can feel them like making muscles while they do it. With Mosley, you're impressed, but you know that you feel like he's like kicked back watching a show and doing this with one hand. Like, yeah.
I can see Walter doing that. I got to meet him back in 2014 before I was anything, before I ever got published. He did a lecture at a college here in Virginia, and he was just the nicest guy, man. And he said something to me that stuck with me, and I reminded of it later. He didn't remember it, but when after the lecture, I had him sign my copy of I wanted him to sign my copy of Devil in a Blue Dress, and I left it at home. So I had to run out to the lobby and buy a copy of one of his books. And the only one left was Debbie Doesn't Do This Anymore, which is not Devil in the Blue Dress. And I got him to sign it. And he asked me, he said, are you an inspired writing? Because that's what the lecture was about. I said, well, I want to be, but I haven't been published yet. And he asked me, he said, have you finished anything? Have you completed a book or a story? I was like, oh, yeah. He said, well, then you're a writer. He said, don't ever call yourself anything else other than that. And that stuck with me, man, forever.
Nice.
Man. He's had such a huge impact on my life, man. I'll tell you another writer that is silk smooth, and you remind me of him so much, is Clive Barker. And you and Clive Barker have this very effortless way of describing either supernatural or horrific things in a way that seems like just run of the mill. And I don't know. I was wondering, are you a fan of his?
I am. I'm a big fan of Barker. I always feel weird when I read him because I feel like his fingers go in my head and do things that I want them to do, But I think that's good. That's good for a horror novel too. But I mean, I think if we're doing anything, and I don't want to class myself with Clive Barker, I'm like 58 rungs lower than Clive Barker, But we're just doing that Southern Gothic thing where everything is the same level of reality, like the crazy made up, like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, where that guy has flies tied to his face or whatever, and they fly around. Like that's told with the same normalness as they're talking about the statues in the square and everything. And I think it's a good way to like kind of ambush the reader a little bit.
I love that, man. I love that definition because I definitely feel that in your writing, man. Because when I first read, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't that familiar with your work. Until The Only Good Indians came out, and then I went back and found everything. Like I got Audible books and and all this stuff. I was just so impressed, man. And
Well,
I
thank
feel
you.
that with mongrels, the way I love, and I hope I'm not giving anything away by saying this.
No.
I love werewolves. I'm a huge, I'm the kid that watched Silver Bullet like 12, 15 times till the VCR
Yeah.
tape broke. So I love werewolves,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And I, I even though that werewolf in that movie looks like a bear, but anyway,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I thought that you did such an incredible job of invoking that sort of southwestern gothic with the creatures and mongrels, where it was
Well, thank
very
you.
much like you said, the same level of reality, where it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we live in this trailer, this mobile home, we're
Mhm.
struggling to make ends meet, but all at the same time, we could transform into these beasts. And I love,
Mhm.
and I'm gushing a little bit, I love
Mhm.
the world building in mongrels. And I know, I mean, we're gonna get back to hard as a chainsaw, but I just had to say that I love the
Mhm.
way you create the rules for the monsters and mongrels and how everything has to work within that template. I love that because I
Oh.
think I read a lot of horror novels where people would create a world and
Mhm.
then have like a Deus Ex Machina way of getting out of it.
Mhm.
And I thought that you did an incredible job keeping the story within this template that you had set up. I love that.
Well, thanks so much, man. I mean, I think in horror, when you are creating a creature, a monster, whatever it is, for me, when I'm writing one, for me to be able to believe in it, I have to. It has to make sense. And like these werewolves that are a 160-pound woman that becomes a 350-pound werewolf doesn't make sense because where does that extra mass come from? And you just have to think about all that stuff. And if it can be like a real biological or supernatural animal, like if it, you're right. I think you're saying. I'm just saying what you said already. If you can come up with a consistent way to do it, then you're on the right road anyways, for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Um, hey, with
Go ahead.
Razorblade Tears, you were in this one more so than Blacktop Wasteland. You were dancing close to like political danger, kind of. Was it
Mhm.
hard? I mean, I think it's wonderful that you're doing it. I think that's what it's our job to do. Is to dance close to dangerous stuff. Was
Mhm.
it was I mean, what kind of a balancing act is that? I don't think I've ever done that myself.
Um, it was something that was kind of unintentional at first, and
Uh-huh.
then once I got into it, I realized, okay, if you're gonna do this, then you really have to button down what you're saying. Because for
Mhm.
anybody who hasn't read the book, basically, Raised by Tears is a story of two fathers who are seeking revenge for their murdered sons, and both their sons were gay, and the sons were actually married, and neither
Mhm.
one of the fathers accepted their son's identity when they were alive, and so now they're trying to do better for them in death than they did when they were alive. And so
Mhm.
I definitely wanted to talk about this, but because I'm not a part of the LGBTQ community, I didn't want to tell it from that perspective. I wanted to talk to and about guys that I grew up with, like
Mhm.
guys that I grew up with who, if you asked them, they wouldn't think they were homophobic. They would tell you, "Hey, man, I've never beat up a gay dude, or I'm not homophobic." Yeah, but you don't want to have somebody who's gay in your house,
Mhm.
or you sit around and you call somebody a derogatory name for homosexuality
Mhm.
on the basketball court. And so when I got into it, I didn't think of it that seriously. I just wanted to talk about it because I thought it was an issue that was interesting, and I thought it
Mhm.
was an issue that needed to be talked about. But I wanted to talk about it within the confines of rural America, where I
Yeah.
think I like to talk about Southern fiction as being based on three things: race, class, and sex. And
Mhm.
because I'm from the South, and I want the South to be the best version of itself that it can be, I felt like I had to talk
Mhm.
about this. But once
Mhm.
I got into it, I started talking to some friends of mine who identify as LGBTQ, and
Mhm.
I had some friends of mine do beta reads for it, and I wanted to make sure that I was presenting all the characters as
Mhm.
realistic and as nuanced and as honest. And honest doesn't mean nice. You
Yeah.
don't have to be nice to be honest. A character doesn't have to be nice to be real. And
Mhm.
so I wanted, and I got some things wrong, and
Mhm.
I got. You have to be able to take that constructive
Mhm.
criticism, because
Mhm.
for me, at the end of the day, my duty as a writer is to tell the truth,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's my duty, is to tell the truth, even if it hurts, even if my voice
Yeah.
shakes. And so, like for instance, there's a scene in Razorblade Tears where our two
Mhm.
protagonists go to a gay bar, quote
Mhm.
unquote, and one of our protagonists is very uncomfortable. He's very homophobic. He's
Mhm.
not he's not able to accept being in a place like this, being in this space. and he gets into an altercation with someone. And in the initial draft, I had the folks, the patrons of the bar, kind of stand off reproachfully and kind of give him this really long, hard stare. And a friend of mine in PJ, Vernon, who's a great writer, and he said, "Hey man, look, if there's a fight at a gay bar, it's the same as a fight at any other bar. Everything's happening all at once." He said, "We're not all standing around like monks and and issuing our disappointment." He said, and so that made me realize, okay, I thought I was doing something really nice because I'm like, man, I'm really honing in on this violation of these folks' safe space. But what I was doing was creating a caricature, not a character. And so I just did it the way I've seen, because I've seen my share of bar fights, unfortunately. I grew up behind a bar. So, I have people, then I changed the scene. So I had people moving out of the way. I had people taking pictures with their phone. I had people getting in the fight and bartenders trying to separate it. And I think that's the thing, man. Whenever even if you're writing something that is inherently political, or you're talking about a deep or a social issue, at the end of the day, you still got to tell a good story. You have to tell a compelling story. Nobody wants a 300-page sermon. So that was my main thing. Well, thank you for asking me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think your first job is to entertain, and anything else you add to that mix is just gravy, but you've got to make people want to read it in the first place. And you're totally right about giving it to readers. Like that's what I did with My Heart is a Chainsaw with Jade, because I've never been a 17-year-old girl, and so I gave it to a lot of my women friends, and I said, give this a look. And I would never ask them, is this authentic? Because I don't think that's a fair question. But I would ask them, what am I doing wrong? And they would give me a list of everything is wrong, and I have to fix everything. So those are the, like you're saying, those are the tough ones to take, because you're not setting yourself up for them to say, oh, this is wonderful, this is great. You're setting yourself up to just get, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But that makes it better in the end, Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
For folks that are listening, I just wanted to, because we've been talking about it a lot, but could you give just a real quick scenario, synopsis of what My Heart is a Chainsaw is about?
Yeah. My Heart is a Chainsaw is Jade Daniels. She's an outsider in her family and her school and her community. She's the only native in Proof Rock, Idaho. They live 8,000 feet up the mountain by Indian Lake, little town of 3,000. And she is a slasher fiend. She lives for slashers. Everything she does involves slashers. So when bodies start turning up, she recognizes the opening beats of the slasher. And so she tries to assign someone as a final girl, because she knows she can never be that, because final girls are these warrior princess angels, and she thinks she doesn't qualify. So she has somebody else to be the final girl to save the day, because she knows there's more bodies coming. And that's pretty much it, But thank you.
I love her. I love her as a character, man. And like I said, growing up as that kid, I'm going to show you how I was like that too, man. I was a huge horror nut. I started out wanting to be a horror writer. It didn't work out. Nobody wanted my horror stuff, and I fell into crime writing, which is, hey, it's cool. It paid for my new recliner, so it's fine. But I'm going to show you real quick how much of a horror nerd. I dug this out just because I knew we were doing this tonight. When I was a kid, I took this from the library at my high school. I never gave it back. I feel so bad. I actually donated some money a couple years ago. But this is the Penguin Encyclopedia of Supernatural and Horror.
Nice.
And I've read this thing from cover to cover.
Nice.
And so I know that sense of being that outsider kid. I grew up in a small town where it didn't have a huge African American population, still doesn't. And within that African American population, I was kind of an oddball because I loved horror movies and I loved sci-fi and stuff like that. And so I definitely understood Jade. I really connected with her and that idea of, I'm not good enough. I'm not the one. And I think a lot of creative people, a lot of people in general, might have that self-doubt that you're not the one. It's not your job to do this. And I really identify with her, not so much in the slasher stuff, but just that sentiment, because I felt like that when I started writing. I don't think anybody's going to want to read my stuff, but if I don't write, I'll go crazy. So
that's how I am too. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for identifying with Jade like that. Go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, man, and I think there's something unique about. I'm gonna put this. there is this. I feel like I've always felt this, and I talked with David Pesco and Nobly Whedon about this too. There's this sort of camaraderie of pain between indigenous and African American communities, and I feel that when I read indigenous writers, that I identify with those characterizations, those characters so much, whether it's on a reservation or whether it's in a small town like Proof Rock, you know, or whether it's the characters from the only good Indians, like those guys, man. I grew up with guys like that in that book, man, and those are my brother and my uncle and my cousins, and so I think it's interesting when you started writing. Did you get any pushback on like centering your books on indigenous characters? And I was curious because I have a story about that from my own self, but I was wondering what you experienced.
No, I'm eager to hear that story. Actually, no, what I got was people always wanted to only center my Indianness, like my third novel that came out, the publisher figured out that my family's name is Calf Looking, and they're like, oh, you're Stephen Calf Looking now. We're going to put that on the cover. That's going to sell some books. And I had to argue that we're not doing that. I'm not going to like sell my heritage to sell books. If people buy my books, I want it to be because there's something interesting on the page, not because there's something interesting on the cover like that, But then I'd write a novel, it'd come out, and I'd see the catalog copy on back, and it would be all about, Native literature written by a Native. Stephen is a member of the Blackfeet Nation, and so they were just like that was what everybody saw as the marketing hook, So, which I never liked that. That's why my first 2 or 3 novels weren't horror, but when everybody kept doing that, I said screw y'all, and I just went somewhere else. I went to write about slashers and zombies and werewolves and vampires and everything, and I was just telling them. I was saying, find the Indian in this if you can. I don't care. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I like when I first started writing, I got rejected a lot, and it was always about this idea that I always got told, "Can you make the books?" And it's funny you say it, but I got told this more than once. Can you make the books more urban, more black? And I'm like, I'm pretty black, and the characters are pretty black, and I don't know what you mean. And like, oh, well, can there be more drug dealers and more hip hoppity? Somebody actually used the term hip hoppity, and I said, well, I'm writing about, there is some hip hop in the book, but I'm writing about the people I grew up with, and what I learned was that some people don't understand that there are rural black folks, that there's a whole section of the country where black people hunt and fish and work on cars and are part of car culture, or work the land, or are landscapers like Ike, or any of that. And that's not to say that's the only thing, And I ran into a lot of people that felt like African American readers and writers were a monolith, and if it didn't take place in New York or Chicago, nobody was going to read it. And I got very lucky because I got with a good agent who really believed in the work, and I got with a good company that believed in it. But yeah, my first 60 to 100 rejections for my first novel was all about, man, can somebody, can there be a T-Bone in here? Can somebody be called T-Bone?
Yeah,
we're not doing that.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good title for a book. I'm pretty black, I like that.
That's the next working title. And I see that we have some questions, so Jennifer's going to come back on and let us answer some questions. So. You're still muted. Oh, you're muted, Jennifer. There you go.
What I didn't want to come on because I just wanted to listen to the two of you talk for the whole rest of the evening. And I gotta say, Mark Twain would have been so happy to be the third party in this conversation, sitting around the dining room table, smoking a cigar and talking to the two of you about writing. This is why we do what we do. So there are some audience questions, and I'm gonna go to those, but thank you so much for that fascinating conversation. I'm gonna go right to Laszlo's question, asking each of you, if your publisher asked you to write a movie or TV show novelization, which title of yours would you choose? So we'll start with you, Sean, and maybe go over to Stephen after that.
Oh man, I can answer this because my the last 2 books got optioned for movies, and I'm not writing the script because I'm not good at script writing. But I think a novelization. I have an unpublished horror novel that I'd love to see made into a TV show, and then write a tie-in novel. So I'll have to say that.
Nice, nice.
All
Oh, that's
right.
wonderful.
We look
Well,
forward to that.
Hopefully it's not unpublished for long, man. Yeah, which so I'd be novelizing one of my own novels. Is that the idea?
Writing a screenplay for one of your own novels. it
Oh,
sounds
okay.
like.
Writing
Yeah.
a screenplay. I've done it for, well, I did it for the Only Good Indians. I wrote it into a pilot for someone. And which I think Zombie Bake Off, maybe. It's one of my novels where there's a recipe days going on in a big coliseum, like a craft thing and cooking thing, and then the pro wrestlers who are that night's ticket, they get there early, and somebody feeds the wrestlers a zombie donut, and so the wrestlers all turn into zombies and fight the soccer moms, and it's pretty loud. Man.
What more could you ask for?
I was hoping you were going to say Night. I was hoping you were going to say Night of the Mannequins, but that's even better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, actually, a producer got me to write that into a screenplay too, and that was really fun. I had to change so many things, but it was really fun.
Well, thank you. Chris, I'm going to put this to both of you. It was posed for Stephen, but each of you, who's your favorite final girl and why?
I'll jump in. I think it's Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street, because she uses her brain to win. You know, she uses her thinking, and she doesn't have to cash in her identity and have big muscles to swing a machete or any of that. So I like it when someone can think their way through to the end.
I will say I don't remember the character's name, but I love the final girl in the first Friday the 13th so much, because
Alice.
I love
Alice.
that when Mrs. Voorhees comes at her, she was just like, "Eff it, I'm cutting your damn head off." I love that just primalness of it. You know, I'm done fighting. I'm tired. I want to go home. I'm cutting your head off. So I'll take her.
And she gets that wonderful slow motion when she does it too. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is for Sean from Chris. In Razorblade Tears, you tackle a lot of the more unfortunate aspects of noir's history, racism, homophobia, etc., head on. Is it difficult, to go back and read any classics of the genre where that sort of thing was rampant?
I think it can be. I get a feeling from different writers of that period how they actually felt about the issues. Like if you read Mickey Spillane, there's a lot of pejorative language in those books, as opposed to Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler, I think there's this idea that people are of their time, but I think that even people of their time knew what was right and what was wrong. And so if you read Ross McDonald, for instance, I very rarely see any pejorative language in Ross McDonald stuff. Raymond Chandler has some, not as much as Mickey Spillane, and then of course you jump across the pond to non-noir stuff. Agatha Christie is one of the great mystery writers of all time, but also she's got some horrible stereotypes in her work. And so I think there's this idea that, oh, you've got to excuse somebody because this was written in 1935 and 1940. And I don't buy that. I think people in 1940 knew what right from wrong just as well as people in 2021. It's like that argument with H.P. Lovecraft. Well, you've got to excuse him because, he was a man of his time. Not everybody named their cat what H.P. Lovecraft named his cat. So that's my take on that.
Yeah.
We're all Googling that right now.
All right. Don't say I didn't warn you.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you. Stephen, this is from Isla. Is there one book you wish you could do over or take back or write over with the wisdom you now have? Thank you for your time.
Oh, wow. Maybe the very first one. I think the Fast Red Road came out in 2000. I have not gone back and reread it, but when you write your very first novel, you think this is my one chance to do anything. I hold up two fingers and say one chance. This is my one chance to do anything. And so you try to pack everything you can in there. It's like a suitcase with stuff poking out every direction, And so when I think back to that novel, I think of it like an overstuffed suitcase, and
Huh.
I wonder if I could have done it in a more straightforward way if I would have had like the knowledge that I'm going to do more books, that I don't have to do everything right now.
Oh, how old were you, Stephen, when you published that?
28 years old.
Okay, so you might have thought that was your one chance.
Yep.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Sean, do you have a similar experience?
I think I would, my very first novel, My Darkest Prayer, I think the same thing Steve said. I felt like nobody's ever going to give me another shot. So I tried to cram everything in there that I loved about mystery writing. And I wish that I could redo it with a little bit more of the wisdom and restraint. Although some people would read my stuff now and say I don't have much restraint, but some restraint that I've learned over the years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, there's restraint and there's restraint. There's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Excuse me, I just dropped my mouse on the floor. So, well, this is a challenge. Alex Needs a Bone, who's one of our very vociferous commenters tonight, says each of you should name his favorite book by the other writer.
Oh man.
Oh, I can do
That
this.
is.
I'll do this quick. I love My Heart is a Chainsaw, but man, Only Good Indians is the last book that had me. I said it to Stephen earlier. The last book that made me flinch, and I don't flinch often. I grew up in a time where you could watch you could watch VHSs called Faces of Death. So the fact that I flinched reading a scene in Only Good Indians, that makes it my favorite book.
Well, thank you so much. No, in 6th and 7th grade, we were trading those VHSs of Faces of Death back and forth in secret, man. Yeah. Man, it's hard. I think I'll say Razorblade Tears, because Sean was saying that like Buddy Lee and Ike are people he grew up with. They're also people I grew up with, and it just felt really right seeing them on the page. It felt like coming home, and it's not always good coming home, but it's good in a way. Anyways, to see familiarity.
Oh,
it's
man.
nice.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that.
Have the two of you ever met in person?
No.
No, but I'm hoping
you
we
should. Because you
Yeah.
really seem to have a connection.
Yeah.
We should have. If we'd got this question earlier, we both could have answered that we don't have any favorites from the other guy.
Sorry.
None at all. None whatsoever.
Alex again asks, can Sean talk a little bit about how much Chester Himes influenced him?
Oh man, yeah, Chester Himes, Donald Goins, and Richard Wright are huge influences on me. Richard Wright isn't necessarily a crime writer, but they were all African American writers writing at a time where African American male writers were not very well known. But specifically to Chester Himes, he wrote about the Harlem Renaissance through the eyes of two police officers, Coffin Ed Jones and Gravedigger, and he was one of the first African American writers to really write about a real African American experience that wasn't filtered through the white gaze, so to speak. And he allowed, I think there's a concept in literature that some people feel like if you're writing about a person of color, that they have to be, this virtuous epitome of character. And Chester Himes like, no, I'm going to write about good people, bad people, indifferent people. There's no magical black folks in his work. And I remember reading as a kid and realizing that I could write about that, and I could write about the full width and breadth of the characters that I grew up with. And I find that his work keeps creeping into my work in that regard.
Awesome. That was a really good question. Thank you. I'm going to invoke host privilege and ask you each, what are you working on next?
I'm going to let Stephen go first.
I've read, probably tomorrow, what's the day, Thursday? Yeah, probably tomorrow. I get notes back on the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, so I'll be jumping back into that for 2 or 3 weeks. And
wow.
And I have due right now 3 or 4 stories by December, so I got to jump in them really quickly. I think I've got a novella due. I forget the date on that, but yeah, I got just it's all horror too. A lot of horror stuff coming out, and I've been writing a lot of forwards and prefaces too. You know, which is really fun because I get to look at these books like about Robert E. Howard or Larry McMurtry or just all these writers whom I respect, and I get to write the opening thing, which is kind of cool. You know, and I don't have to do any of the hard work of actually writing the essay. You know,
Wow, but
I'm currently, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just saying that's an honor to be asked to do that. That's awesome. And Sean, how about you?
I'm I'm in the middle of revising an audible audio drama I wrote. So it's going to be an audible dramatic audio production. I'm writing and finishing the notes on that. That was the first time for me. That was great.
Oh, wow.
I'm in
Yeah.
talks to write I'm in talks to write a comic book. I can't talk too much about that yet. With a character I came up with. And I'm also in the middle of writing my next book for Flatiron, tentatively titled All the Sinners Bleed. And it's about the first Black sheriff in a small southern town in 2017, right after the election of the Orange Menace, who finds out that his small town has been the dumping ground for a trio of serial killers. And two of them are dead when the book opens, and one of them is still out there. So he's trying to find this person while also trying to handle a Unite the Right type rally that's going to happen in this town in a week. So he's got a lot of pressure. My usual lighthearted family fare.
Well, one of the things I'd like to say is that the Mark Twain House and Museum is a writer's home and a home for writers. And I feel like you both are part of our community of writers now. And I want you both to promise that you will come to the Mark Twain House, and we'll take you on a tour, and we'd love to have you. So thank you for this fabulous evening. It's been fascinating. And I know based on the chat that the audience has loved it too. So I want to remind people, if you were not inclined to purchase these books before this conversation, I cannot begin to imagine that you don't want to buy them now. And remember that you get signed copies if you order them through the links that we put in the chat. And thank you everybody so much. And thank you, Sean and Stephen, for sharing everything with us this evening. It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
My
For having us.
Our
It's good seeing you,
pleasure.
Steve.
You too, man. You too.
Take
All
care,
right.
everybody. Good night. Thank
All
you.
right. Good night. Bye-bye.
My
For having us.
Our
It's good seeing you, Steve.
You too, man. You too.
Take
All
care,
right.
everybody. Good night. Thank
All
you.
right. Good night. Bye-bye.